Get your questions ready for the franchise, Shane Douglas. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Chris Featherstone here for yet another episode of UnSKripted. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's another day to ask your questions for some of the best, ladies and gentlemen. And this person is no different. Man, look, I have no idea why he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame with his accolades. I know that he is a very controversial figure, but so is 60% of the WWE Hall of Fame. So that's no excuse to me. He is a former United States champion, Intercontinental champion, multi-time tag team champion, and the franchise of ECW, Shane Douglas. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. Triple threat, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, man. How's life going on? How's life going in your world?
I want to let you know, though, I've dug out the fancy duds for tonight and got out the gold face mask. So nice. That's only for like formal occasions, brother.
Oh man, I feel absolutely special, man. I appreciate you pulling out the bandana, man. It's the franchise bandana. I appreciate it. You ready to get into these questions, man?
Absolutely, man. It's about like the crack of dawn for me at this time of night. But yeah, I think the old cobwebs are still cleared up there.
Good stuff. All right, let's start off with Royto saying, Shane, what did it mean to you being the first of 11 men to win a championship at all three major U.S. promotions in the 1990s after you won the Intercontinental Championship in 1995?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't know I was on that list. Or let alone the first. I never really paid attention to that kind of stuff. We were talking the other day. We had a virtual signing. Simon Diamond, Too Cold, Mikey Whipwreck, Jerry Lynn, and myself. And I was asking them, because today memorabilia has become such a big thing. Mm-hmm. And and I asked them, because I was like the dumb guy, I guess, because when my boots wore out, I threw them out and got a new pair. Now all that stuff seems to be worth something, I guess. But I didn't really pay attention to the stuff. I mean, it was really cool when the promotion tapped you to be the champion, because that gave you sort of a feeling that you were doing right, doing good for the company. But I never really paid attention to how many times, what it was. It was at that moment in time trying to be the best Intercontinental champion, for the 30 seconds that I was, the best ECW champion, U.S. heavyweight champion, all the rest of them.
You call Shawn Michaels to lose a smile, man. Why'd you do that, Shane?
Where I come from, and I'm sure most of the people watching this, we don't say those kind of things, right? I mean, we'll go in the corner, maybe cry to ourselves or something. But
yeah, exactly. I agree. Guillermo's asking, could you please tell us how the Dean Douglas gimmick was born, and was there anything that you liked about that gimmick or not?
Yeah, great question. The Vince McMahon had been wooing me for some time in 95. I believe late 94, 95. I was completely thrilled being in ECW. I didn't want to leave. There was no reason to leave. I was teaching school during the week and making a good living from that, and making a darn good chunk of change on the side with ECW. And, there was really no downside to it. Plus working for the ECW fans. But he pitched the character to me that he had seen, he was seeing at that time their top stars, all of them, because we all do every night make mistakes, but he was seeing them make like these simple, like sort of, mind fart mistakes. Like for instance, I remember one he pointed out was that Bret Hart wasn't grapevining the leg except on the 1, 2, 3. Some of the guys putting their arms at the top rope in the corner, little things like that. And he pitched the character to me that it was going to be somebody that had been around the business for a while, that was known for his in-ring prowess, and pointing it out. And it would sort of be like a nudge to the elbow, elbow nudge to the ribs, like wink, wink. Hey, tighten your work up. And, most of the guys that I recall at the time didn't seem to care, but there were a few guys that seemed to take it personally, I guess, that I was, making fun of their work or something. And, some of them even lost their smile over it. So, but, I thought the way the character was pitched to me then, plus I should go a little further. It was told to me that it would be a collegiate character. And I'd come from that world, so I knew what they were looking for with that, and that he would give legitimate grades, A, B, C, D, and F, and that they would send me the tape each week. I could watch. They would pick the match, but I would watch the match and pick out the things that I thought needed pointed out. That went on for I think 2 weeks, and then suddenly I would get a tape, and they would say, "Okay, at 346, grade this with this grade," and it was like TT for terrible twosome and really cornball stuff like that. And, that was when the character started going off the rails to me. It had no legitimacy.
Yeah. I agree. I think there's, as a fan back then, I was so used to, before ECW Shane Douglas, I was so used to dynamic dudes, babyface, Shane Douglas, and Ricky Steamboat's one of my top 3 favorite of all time. So
mine too, yeah.
you was already good in my book because you was teaming with Ricky. So so it was, you were good by me. So
Steamer was great. Have you ever had him on the show?
I have. He's been on my show before, and I had on the. This show is actually a spinoff of my my weekly episodic show called the Pancakes and Power Slam Show. On Pancakes Power Slams every week, I used to have an interview, and then Sports Kita brought it over here. We named it Unscripted, and so Ricky has been on Pancakes and Power Slams, and I actually had my 9-year anniversary show 2 weeks ago, and so nice. I had a bunch of thank you. I had a bunch of cameo appearances of people who was there. Drew McIntyre was on, and Ricky Steamboat was on, and he showed the Dragon's Den and said, "Dr. Chris, congratulations for 9 years." It was really cool because as much as I've been a journalist for 10 years, and I've interviewed 300 people, 16. I think I'm at 16 WWE Hall of Famers now, and Steamboat still beyond me. This being my job now, I still got an inner mark, when it comes to Ricky Steamboat, for him to do something like that and say, it was pretty cool. Spend the time to do that. It was pretty cool for me. So what you see with Ricky, like when you interview him, that's Ricky Steamboat. I mean, he's just a genuinely nice guy, great human being, just good friend. Yeah, he is, and we've texted back and forth many times just because he remembers me, and I'm good friends with Bobby Fulton. That's actually, I've seen you a bunch of times there at Bobby Fulton shows.
Yeah.
And Steamboat came one day, and excuse me, and my oldest is 8.5. And I used to take him when he was like 4, like 4 years old. And he remembers you too. Actually, if I tell him, because it was Mr. Bobby and Mr. Shane. Mr. Bobby was the good guy, and Mr. Shane was the bad guy. And he's like, "Oh, Mr. Shane, he hates you, because you're a heel. You're supposed to be hated." And so, you would make Bobby Fulton bleed in y'all's hardcore matches in Ohio, and he was like, he would go like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe Mr. Shane did that," and I'm good friends with Onyx. He's one of the indie wrestlers there.
Good guy,
yeah. That's my guy. Sean's my guy, and so Shawn, he actually linked me up. I said, "Man, I said, before you go, you got to get Steamboat out here. Like I got to take a picture with him." And Shawn, he went to the back, grabbed Ricky. I waited for like 10, 20 minutes, and then he finally came out. We took a picture, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so cool!" So, yeah, really cool. And then I told him about that moment when I brought him on my show. He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he was pretty cool." So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's pretty much how I felt when I was working with him. He was, like top tier of our business, right?
yeah,
Top babyface. And if you watch the matches when we were tagging, uh, pay close attention to me when I'm on the apron, because Ricky will take a bump and he'd cover his face up and he'd be yelling at me, get in the match, partner, because I'd be
mhm.
watching it like a fan.
Yeah,
I was so mesmerized by the match.
yeah. He'll do that to you with this in-ring work for sure,
Oh,
man.
he sure will.
Yeah. Elvis is asking, Mr. Shane Douglas, what an opportunity to finally hear from you. How did you get me the franchise? I guess to be the franchise, and how does your ECW days compare to your days in wrestling? I guess overall, you are the longest ECW reigning champion.
What's up, Elvis? Thank you for the question. Yeah, well, the franchise gimmick, Paul Heyman had brought the idea to me. Let me see if I can get this camera to stabilize a bit here. The Eddie Gilbert had started booking ECW when Todd Gordon bought it from Eastern Championship Wrestling, and had given me the moniker the Fabulous One, Shane Douglas, and it was, there was such a nebulous idea, I really couldn't hone in on anything. There was no direction to it for me. When Paul Heyman took over a few months in, he came to me, and that was the first year in 1993 that the NFL was naming a franchise player for each team, and I guess insinuating the most important player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came to me with the idea, and the only direction he gave me was that he wanted me to wear, he was friends with Lawrence Taylor. I knew, Lemieux and Yager and Marino, through the different people through the years. And we figured that each time I go to the ring, I'd wear a Yager jersey or a Lemieux jersey or whatever. And then he told me he wanted to be a heel. And I said, well, if he's a heel, wouldn't he expect them to wear his jersey
Yeah.
when they play? And he stopped and he said, you get the character. So, that's where the idea came from. But, it was still such a broad idea, as a baby face all my career up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was the opposite of being a baby face. Just do opposite what you do as a baby face, and worlds apart different.
Yeah.
And I got fortunate being booked with Terry Funk initially, one of the greatest heels in our business, right? So learn from him every night. And then that each time I'd work, I would, try some things didn't work, some things did. And over the course of 6 months or so, I kept honing it down to where, this broad, just mean bad guy became a big mouth lout, that had very stark views.
Yeah.
And comparing the time, I've loved all, my near 40 years in wrestling. I mean, it's all been an incredible adventure. For a kid, I can remember, like you were talking about your son at Bobby Fulton shows. I remember my dad taking me to wrestling, and it was like being on a different planet. And you'd watch those guys in the ring, and they seemed just so over the top incredible at what they did. And when you break into wrestling, we had a great trainer in Dominic Danucci. But even then, I remember Mick and I talking, and Cody Michaels and Mark Curtis at Dominic's school talking. Like, we knew we were good for local stuff, but we didn't think there was any way we could ever be on the national scene. And then, you just get into the business, you start to build up and learn. There's been bad stuff along the way, like in any career, but when I look back at the entirety of the 40 years, it's all been incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That said, those 6.5, 7 years in ECW, it was like you read a great book about something crazy in some other world place that exists, and you think, wouldn't it be great to go there? ECW was that place. I had never worked anywhere before that other wrestlers in the dressing room would give you an ovation when you came back from the ring. There was such a camaraderie backstage. The guys always cutting up and just having a good time and fun. It was it'd be Wednesday of the week, and you'd be getting excited. Like, I get to go to work in 2 weeks, 2 days.
Nice, yeah.
So yeah, ECW was something special.
Yeah, indeed it was. Guillermo is asking, what was the original plan for you and HBK at In Your House 4?
Great question. Vince had sat us down and talked to us. He wanted a repeat of the Rick Rude Ultimate Warrior angle. where Rude went over for the Intercontinental title, and later it would be WrestleMania World title, be Chin Music. We had gotten. I was in Germany and Austria for 2.5 weeks beforehand. Got back and like a Thursday or Friday. We were supposed to fly in Tuesday, me, Vince, and Shawn into Regina, and I get a phone call from Davey Boy Smith. One of my good departed friends, rest his soul. And Davey was like a gremlin. Davey liked to stir the pot up a little bit, right? And so he called me up and he just telling me about the goings on while I was gone. And it was during that time that we were in Germany that we had heard that Shawn had been attacked. And I'm not exaggerating. It was some ridiculous number, like 15 people jumped him or something in a bar.
Yeah,
and it didn't make sense. And this isn't like a put down on Shawn. But Shawn's not known in the business as being a tough guy. So I'm thinking it took 15 people, like what was it, 15 kids or something, so he told me the full story on that. And then he said, he's been talking smack behind your back while you were in Germany. I said, because I thought Shawn and I were friends. And he said, well, he's telling everybody in the dressing room he's going to embarrass you on the pay-per-view. And I said, knowing darn right well, whatever I said to Davey would go right back the other direction, right? I said, well, I'd like to see him try because I'll stretch his if he tries. So the next day I get a phone call from J.J. Dillon saying, you and Shawn aren't needed in Regina on Tuesday. Shawn's had a relapse of his concussion. Well, having been accepted to medical school, I know you don't relapse a concussion unless you get hit in the head again.
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, well, how in the world did he get hit in the head again? And he said, JJ said, well, he didn't get hit in the head again. He just had a relapse. And I went, oh, okay. So Davey Boy did take it back and some things started shaking out. And the rest, as you saw, play out. That night in the building, we got to the building in Regina. I was called down to Vince's office. And, long story short, called me in his office. It's all dark. And he's going on and on about how much he loves my promos and the character presence and on and on and on. He said, then, Shawn's going to come out. He said, you're in gear and you cut one of those scathing promos. He said, then at that point, Shawn's going to come out and he's going to hand you the title. And I said, and I used some pretty selective language. I said, no, please don't do that. And he said, why not? And I said, Vince, all my life I've grown up listening to the champion say, you'll have to pry this belt out of my cold, dead hands.
Yep.
Or till I get a little bump on the head, then I'll just hand it over to you. And I said, I'm sure he can super kick. Just have him super kick me and pin me 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. And he said, no, we're committed to this. I appreciate it. We're committed to this. Now, we've been talking about 40 minutes at this point, and he goes, I don't know if I can get it in my camera shot here as we're talking. He goes, and then at that point, and he stretches his arm out to the side and just holds it there. So I'm looking at it, like we're looking at each other's face, and I'm like, what's he doing with his arm? So I look down at his arm, and I slowly followed down his arm, and I look over in the dark shadows in this darkened room, and Razor Ramon's sitting in a locker over here listening to the whole conversation. And I looked at Vince and I said, what kind of game are you playing here, Vince? And, of course they went through and did it that way. And, it was like, I'm sure the fans didn't see a babyface to babyface belt switch there in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. I read something, excuse me. I read, Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest of all time, hands down. I read somewhere they did like a stat of like a lot of the championships that Michaels lost. It was not by a clean finish. It was like he lost he handed the title to you. He got mad when he was teaming with Diesel and threw the belt down. He lost, to a screwy finish when he gave up the European Championship. Like it was like a pattern of like titles that wasn't a clean finish.
Yeah.
And I saw this a few years ago. I was like, I never noticed that. That was really interesting.
Well, and you hit on something earlier, and I want to reiterate it. Shawn is an incredible in-ring performer. I mean, head and shoulders above most everybody else in the business that way. But when you have to rely on the politics and the backstabbing To me, that tells me you don't have enough confidence in yourself. Now, back to ECW, we had said a few minutes ago about how the guys would respond when you come back from the ring.
Mm-hmm.
There was an unspoken challenge in ECW. Never one time did I ever go up to anybody, because I was always on late or last. Did I ever go up to anybody and go, hey, Taz, thanks for tearing the house down. Now I got to work harder. That was, okay, Taz, you did great. I'm going to go top it. And that was the sort of challenge that we sort of threw at each other's feet there in ECW. Yeah. And I think it spoke in the product, but you'd have to ask Shawn. I never understood why he had to resort to that kind of stuff. He was a very different person in 2005 than I'd remembered in 1990 when I was there, when we all traveled together. And I think it's a shame. And now that fans are looking back and picking stuff out like that he, had all these like neat little asterisks in the drop belt drops. Me, I was the guy that had Beulah McGillicuddy pin me, so I'm proud of that to this day.
Lead by example.
That's right, absolutely.
David is asking, you're a pleasure to watch in this ECW arena. What are some of your favorite moments?
Thank you very much. The promo that we did, and there's a million of them in that arena. But the promo the night that we did the NWA tournament, and I'd wrestled Too Cold in the final match. That building was 114 degrees that night. There, a hot August evening, in Philadelphia, and I'd already wrestled twice. I'd wrestled Taz and wrestled Dean Malenko, not two slouches in their own right. And I was blown sky high, and I knew we had to go out and deliver, a really top star match, and Scorpio stepped it up, brother. I mean, he got in the ring and pulled it through. And my biggest thing was trying to remember the names. I knew the core names that I was a big fan of, but I wanted to make sure that I hit some of those that I wasn't around to watch whenever I was younger and things. And I got into the ring, and it came time to do the promo. And in my head, I'm still going back and forth. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. The only people in the building that were aware it might happen was me and Todd Gordon and Paul Heyman. And, when I finally locked eyes with Dennis Corluzzo, and he had been on Mike Tenay's radio show earlier that week and said, to every nationally broadcast show, anybody that's thinking of booking Shane Douglas, I wouldn't do it, because he'll just take your money and no-show you. And I'd never no-showed anybody in my career, and I was still making we were making about 75% of our money on the independents at that point. So it popped into my head to do it. And when I stop and I say, "Here we go, Dad," that was a culmination of a lifetime of experiences with my dad. My dad was a World War II vet, heavily decorated, a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars. I mean, a genuine man's man, right? And, we grew up with that, nationalism, the love of country, the whole thing. And he used to always tell me as a kid, and I used to shake my head and say, "Okay, Dad." Had no idea what he was talking about. He used to say, "Son, you can walk with your feet on the ground like everybody else, or you can soar with the eagles." And I never, at that moment, in that ring, after winning over Too Cold, I understood for the first time in my life what he meant. And that's why we threw the belt down. And the promo itself, I never, so the fans understand, I never would pre-write a promo. I would never stop and say, "Okay, here's a cool line. I'll write that and throw it in." I would do it off the top of my head. And that way it felt better to me. And, like we're doing right now, we're not looking at scripts or anything as we're talking.
Right.
And, but I did want to remember the names. I wanted to make sure I cited those key names that I thought were instrumental to NWA. And I was so blown up that I was completely blank. And the fans start throwing the names in. And that not only bought me time, but I think in hindsight, watching that promo, it makes it look so legitimate.
Yes.
It's so real when you watch it. And, so that stands out. And the other one would be the flip side that most people would probably be surprised to hear me say, was when we did the Halo throwdown with Gary Wolf.
Oh, wow.
I'd grown up in the business. You hear from all the old timers when you're a kid in the business, growing into the, coming up in the business.
Yeah.
You hear the old timers all talking about. If you listen to them, you'd think they were all 10 feet tall and they had wings and never had a bad match, right? And so you start to get to the point where you think it's a little bit of a myth being thrown in here. You'd hear these stories about white heat. And, I'd gotten to the point by that time in my career that I figured this is just one of those myths that they were all great, perfect wrestlers back in the day. And when I jumped out of the ring to get away from the fans jumping in ring left, camera left, uh, my plan is get Franny and get out of there to get away from the danger. And I see two cops coming around the ring post in head to toe riot gear.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I remember ever being afraid in an arena. I was literally waiting to hear a gunshot go off or feel something stab into me. I thought we were in real trouble. I mean, we were, because the 1,100 people in that building were trying to get us.
Yeah.
But as a heel, like you said about your son earlier, about him hating me because I was the bad guy, right? That's what we work for. And so, afterwards, and once we were out of the building and safely away, and now in hindsight, looking back at it, you can say, well, Francine and I must have been pretty good at our jobs if we could get the crowd to do that in ECW Arena.
100%. Absolutely. I started watching wrestling around 85, 86. And man, I just, that's what I'm used to, man. I'm used to the just chicken crap, dastardly, menacing heels, just the bad guys that you love to hate,
Absolutely.
I love it, and that's what makes, that's what creates good baby faces, is good heels. What I mean? If you have someone good to dance with, that's what helps build a star, a babyface star. So
that's right.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yep. David is saying, love your show, Doc. Thank you, David. Which championship was the most important in your career?
Oh, boy. I think clearly the ECW belt, because we, especially at that time, the Eastern Championship belt had been a heavyweight belt. It was a regional, we considered it a regional heavyweight belt. But when we threw the NWA belt down and changed the name to Extreme, we started calling it a world title. And, that's, I think the reason we're all so proud in ECW is because we were a company that did it on a once every 3 week show out of the ECW Arena, and didn't have $1 billion corporation behind us or some huge network conglomerate or Amazon or Hulu or Netflix. We were able to do it the old fashioned way, the way that the territories had always done it. And left a legacy. It would have been really easy for us to do that. And, 6 months out after we were out of business, everybody had forgotten about ECW, you'd have thought. And here we are, 20 plus years later, the fans still chanting ECW, and I'm still doing shows like yours, like this. And, so I want the fans to hear this as clearly as I can say it. It's only because of them. It's only because of the fans that have made ECW what it is that anybody still even remembers us or what we did in that arena. So I would say that belt for sure. I would say the second and third would have been the NWA WCW tag team titles with Steamboat, because that was the first time I became a main eventer. And then before that, my first belt ever in the business was the UWF TV title. And so those were sort of auspicious to me, all three.
Yeah, very nice. And I agree with you with ECW, for a company that was only in operations for 7 years. I mean, it left such an indelible legacy for sure. All right, you got time for a minute lightning round? I'm fire some questions.
Absolutely. Let's give it a try here. Let me get comfortable to make sure I'm in good, so I can get my juices flowing.
All right, sounds good. Here we go. All right, let's start with Elvis. Who did you enjoy the most working with in ECW? How was Eddie and Benoit? Any PG stories you can share about Eddie and Benoit?
Working in ECW, again, a bunch of the guys, I love working with everybody there, but Taz and Bam Bam, because I had really good chemistry with both of them. Eddie and Benoit were just great guys. The stories you hear about them, Eddie was as nice of a person as you could find. Chris was very quiet, almost to the point of being introverted, but not, if that makes sense. He would dabble around, but there'd be 5 of you standing around, 4 of us he'd be talking, and Chris wouldn't be. But got along great with all those guys, and loved working with them. Backstage area in ECW Arena, boy, if we'd have known the legacy we were going to leave, we would have been filming that stuff back there. And there was one documentary. What was it called?
Dark Side.
No, not Dark Side. It was. Oh, geez, I could see the guy's face. Anyway, he filmed some segments back there when Paul did one of his pre-show speeches, and that captures a little bit of a glimpse of it. But now, imagine that for hours and hours and hours, because we were there like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 1 or 2 in the morning, and all cutting up.
Yeah, I have one of the ECW DVDs, but is it Forever Hardcore?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Forever Hardcore.
Yeah. I'm real quick. I'm glad you mentioned Bam Bam. He's an uncrowned, legend to me. Just, I'm glad he won the ECW World Championship, because he deserved the World Championship to me.
Yes.
But for him to never win a title in WWE is still just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I agree.
Do you have any funny Scott Steiner stories?
The thing with Scott, not really funny stories. Scott and I have always gotten along great. The thing for me was, like, when he came back as Papa Pump, he looked so different than the first time, when he had the dark hair and looked more like Rick Steiner's brother, and was doing the Frankensteiner and all of that. But I always got a kick out of watching his promos, because it was a different flavor, and you just went on the ride with him to go along with it,
Ric Flair, I'll punch you.
Great stuff.
Guillermo, how was it working with Nash and Hall during your time in WCW? Your opinion on the curtain call moment?
When in WCW, the first time, I worked not with those guys, but I was in the company with them when Ricky Steamboat and I were together. Scott was doing the Diamond Stud, and Kevin was doing the Oz gimmick, and I got along fine with them there. Got along great. In fact, Scott used to travel with me and Johnny all the time, and then when we went back in 2000, 2001 or whatever it was, there was, that sort of like, hey, let's like leave that behind us thing, what happened in 95.
Yeah.
And, but what I saw in WCW in that last time I was there was the politics really became a cancer in that company. It just, it was eating it alive. The right hand was eating the left hand, and when it wasn't, the left hand was eating the right hand. And it was embarrassing to watch and see. And you can see what the end result was.
Yeah. Yeah. Too many Chiefs.
Yeah.
For sure. Emily's asking, what did you teach?
I was a 7th through 12th history teacher, constitutional Constitution teacher. Constitutional Foundations was my major class. Economics, and typically surrounded my history classes would be go from then in the school I was at, the curriculum was century to century, but I would dwell on the Civil War and the on the 19th century and World War II, obviously because of my dad in the 20th century.
Nice. Rise is asking, how come you're not in a video game?
It's I was in the ECW video games. Again, that'd be something you have to ask Vince. Vince and I have a very terse relationship. I respect the hell out of him, what he's accomplished. I don't think Vince has the capacity to respect other people. I think he thinks I'm paying you, so you should kiss my ass, literally or figuratively. And I come from a place where I'll work for you, I'll bust my butt for you, and I'll show you respect, but I expect to get that same respect back. And I never saw it from him. When I went there in 95, he always made it a point to come talk to me about ECW. And I don't know if he was doing it intentionally or just thought, thinking about what he was saying, but he never once invoked those letters with me, ECW. He would come to me and he would say, hey, when you worked in the bingo hall company, when you were in the small pond, the minor leagues, the blood and guts company. And I thought to myself, like, does he not realize how much that's pissing me off when he says that? It just was so stupid. Wow.
All right. For the second time, last question. Does anybody from today's roster remind you of you?
Yeah. see tinges of in Cody Rhodes, timing things, and I think it's probably because I learned from his dad, right? A lot of stuff. But I also MJF. I see real old school tendencies in him and heel tendencies, and I think that's why he stands out like a sore thumb, right? Because it's so different from everything else you're seeing.
Yep, 100%. All right, last question, real quick. How did you get along with Sting in WCW?
Oh, we got along great. In fact, when I first went to UWF in '86, I moved in with Sting and his then wife Sue in Texas. Sting taught me a ton about bodybuilding and lifting. I didn't know a thing about it, and we've been friends ever since. We see each other. It's like it's been a while since I've seen him, but when we do see each other, it's pick right up with the conversation and how's everybody doing, and great, good stuff. Good friend.
Nice. Let the listeners know what things you got going on in your podcast.
The podcast coming up this week, they've got, they always throw me all kind of curveballs, but we typically cover the stuff for the last week. I think this week we're going to be hitting a lot on WrestleMania and the post aftermath, if you will, of WrestleMania. On social media, it's the Franchise SD. On Gab, it's the Franchise Shane Douglas, and on Facebook, it is Shane the Franchise Douglas. Why they put it that way, I have no idea, but it goes in the middle. Shane the Franchise.
Good stuff, man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, man. A blast.
Chris, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right.
Good time.
Good night.
Good night, buddy. Thanks.
Bye.